The blade that does not swing is still a blade, and in stillness, it sharpens. Most will mistake silence for surrender, retreat for weakness, and waiting for fear. But I have learned that the soldier who withdraws without panic sees what others do not. He is not blind to opportunity. He watches it form. You think war is a roar, but war begins as a breath, held in, measured, coiled. The first move that matters is not the step forward, but the refusal to step at all. While others rush, I listen. While others speak, I observe. This is not hesitation. This is the art of remaining unexposed. A commander's greatness is not seen in how loudly he charges, but in how invisibly he waits. I have stood in valleys where armies screamed to be seen. I watched them crumble, not from steel, but from their need to be noticed. Those who seek applause in battle rarely hear the sound of victory. They are too distracted by their own echo. I do not speak for attention. I speak to prepare. The battlefield is not where strategy begins. It begins the moment you are overlooked. When your enemy believes you are broken, that is your weapon. There is no cloak greater than retreat. It hides your force in plain sight. Step back, not because you are lost, but because you are aligning. Distance is not always defeat. Often, it is the straightest path to precision. When you retreat, you begin to see where the real pressure lies, not from your opponent, but from within. The pressure to act when stillness is wiser. The pressure to shout when silence would echo further. Most cannot bear retreat. It reveals them to themselves. That is why it is so powerful. It tests discipline in its rawest form. Can you walk away with your blade sheathed? Can you step backward without turning your back? Can you become invisible and not vanish? I have watched commanders press forward without clarity. They confuse momentum with progress, action with achievement. Their armies fall not to enemies, but to exhaustion. They cannot distinguish between speed and haste. They confuse aggression with dominance. They bleed in pursuit of illusion. I strike only when my presence is no longer required to strike. That is control. Victory begins with subtraction. Remove ego, remove noise, remove the need to be seen. Then you will strike, and none will know from where the blow came. Not even the one who falls. There is an art in withdrawal. Not the coward's retreat, but the strategist's curve. Step back. Let them chase. Let them expose their hunger. Let them run blind into terrain you shaped while they slept. A mind trained in war does not fight battles. It ends them before they begin. The sword does not worry whether it is seen. It waits for the hand to be steady. So too must you wait, until your thought is quiet, your breath is steady, and your will no longer needs reassurance. Only then should you enter the storm, not to join the chaos, but to become the eye of it. I do not fear noise. I let it pass. I do not chase advantage. I create silence and let the world offer its own weaknesses. Retreat, when mastered, is not withdrawal. It is repositioning. It is the art of appearing to vanish while never losing sight of the target. It is the compression of power into a narrower strike. The deeper the bow pulls back, the further the arrow flies. You will be called passive. You will be told to fight, to show, to act. Let them talk. The loudest commanders are the first to fall to unseen pressure. They fight because they cannot bear stillness. But you must bear it. You must outweight their confidence. There is no virtue in reaction. Reaction is already a loss. But control is born from the one who sees the pattern before it emerges, who moves before motion is visible. That control often wears the face of retreat, It bends, it disappears, it yields, only to return where least expected. I have seen warriors win without raising dust, because the true war is always internal. Before you dominate another, you must first disappear from within. No fear, no need to prove, no twitch in the mind when they call you weak. This is retreat as weapon. A still mind cannot be outflanked. It is not how hard you hit, it is when, it is where, and most of all, it is who you are before the strike. A scattered mind makes noise, a disciplined mind makes war. You are not to be driven by pain. You are to shape pain. Let it harden your frame, refine your edge, expose your reflexes, but never let it choose your movement. You are not here to be a victim of force. You are here to become the source of it. So, I step back. Not because I lack the power to move forward, but because I choose when that power is revealed. I have seen generals stand at the edge of chaos and smile, not because they wished for blood, but because they had already won long before the swords met. Victory was not in the swing. It was in the formation that never needed to shift, in the line that never needed to shout. To retreat is to know what to preserve, what to protect, what cannot be risked, even for pride. To retreat is to offer the illusion of space while narrowing your enemy's path. It is to open the gate, not because you are welcoming, but because you know they will walk into a trap of their own making. Let them overextend. Let them grow bold. Let them mock the silence. Then, when they believe you have vanished, appear not as noise, but as consequence. There is nothing more terrifying than a force that returns after you thought it fled, because now it is no longer chasing victory, it is embodying it. I do not fight for domination, I fight for alignment. My strike is the result of preparation, of waiting, of watching you move one step too far into the fog. Then, and only then, I release what I have never shown. And by the time you see it, it has already passed through you. This is not the way of those who hunger for war. This is the way of those who have mastered it. I do not announce my return. I let the imbalance announce it for me. When an army leans too far forward, gravity becomes my ally. When a mind grows too sure of victory, doubt becomes my weapon. And when the enemy forgets I still exist, I strike as if I never left. The mind trained in retreat is a mind that listens beyond noise. It observes not just movement, but intent. Not just position, but momentum. There is a difference between the warrior who lunges and the one who draws you in. And that difference is not seen on the field, but in the mind before the field is entered. A false retreat is not deception. It is discipline. The discipline to deny your instinct to strike too soon. The discipline to starve your need for validation. And in that starvation, clarity is born. They will believe you have broken formation. Let them believe it. There is power in absence. There is direction in stillness. A retreating force is not lost. It is gathering shape, like water pulled back before the wave. The further it withdraws, the greater the strike to come. I have walked behind the front lines, not in fear, but in strategy. I have watched enemies chase shadows, believing they had routed me, only to find themselves surrounded by silence, the kind that listens, the kind that closes in slowly. What is seen is not always what is true. What is loud is not always what is lasting. A war of visibility is a war of exhaustion. But I choose a different battlefield, the one where presence is invisible, but impact is absolute. The reason most cannot master retreat is because they are addicted to motion. They fear pause, not because pause is dangerous, but because it reveals the noise within. But when you learn to sit in that silence, unmoved, untouched, you begin to rule from the unseen. A retreat can only be called weak by those who fear emptiness. But I do not fear it. I study it. I let the void teach me where the force will move next. I watch the cracks widen in my opponent's mind as they chase what they do not understand. I do not need to be fast. I need to be exact. In war, precision is power, and precision is never born from noise. You must become the terrain, not the soldier who runs across it, but the shape that dictates his direction. You do not fight battles, you shape them, not with might, but with inevitability. Let them advance, let them overreach, let them expose their supply lines, stretch their morale, speak too boldly in the open. When they believe the field is theirs, I own it, not by force, but by function. Because every step they take forward is a step into the ground I have already prepared. This is not retreat. This is architecture. Strategy is not motion. It is construction. I build before I move. I measure before I speak. I align before I strike. That is why I can disappear and still be present. That is why I can lose a position and gain the advantage. That is why I can seem behind, yet already be waiting at the end of your next move. They do not understand patience, because they have never felt power without display. But power without display is the sharpest kind. It does not warn, it does not seek, it does not tire, it only executes. You think the one who strikes first wins, but the one who makes the first strike necessary has already won. The first strike is not the beginning, it is the response. And when your enemy is forced to respond, they are no longer leading. They are being led. I would rather control one strike than swing 100 without purpose. So I delay. I vanish. I become less than visible. I let others burn their momentum. And when the moment comes, when their feet are planted too deep, when their plans are written in ink, when they have locked themselves into the illusion of certainty, then I return. But I return as consequence, not as participant. The blade that emerges from retreat does not need to shout. It arrives already at the neck. There is no clash. There is only silence, followed by understanding. Retreat is not absence of action. It is the decision to wait until action is unavoidable. It is the resistance to being moved by impulse. It is the shaping of the field until you are the only path through it. The masters of war do not chase victories. They invite them by creating conditions where no other outcome is possible. I do not need to win battles. I need to ensure my enemy cannot win. Retreat allows you to study. It opens your eyes to patterns. You see who rushes, who hesitates, who exposes themselves in pursuit of momentum. You see what they depend on, and you learn what they fear most: stillness. A still opponent is the most dangerous kind, because you cannot read what does not move. You cannot anticipate what does not announce itself. That is why retreat is terrifying, not to me, but to them. I have sat for days behind the fog, unmoved, unshaken, and I have watched empires collapse because they could not sit 1 hour in uncertainty. I did nothing, and they fell. Because my doing nothing was not nothing. It was everything they were not prepared to face. A presence that does not move yet does not leave becomes unbearable. You must be willing to let the field breathe, not fill it. You must be willing to be misunderstood. You must master the art of being underestimated, for it is the only path to true asymmetry. If they see you clearly, they can prepare. If they believe you are gone, they expose themselves. If they think you are afraid, they become bold. And that boldness is your invitation. You must know when to step back, not just physically, but mentally, from argument, from distraction, from noise. You must retreat from within first. Pull back your assumptions, withdraw your urgency, remove your need to be proven right. Then you will begin to see. Retreat reveals more than aggression ever could. It teaches you what must be preserved, what must be abandoned, and what must be struck, but only once. There is no glory in flailing, only in arriving, once, and without the need for repetition. That is the strike of one who waited. To strike once is to understand everything that came before it. It means you did not strike to see if it would work. You struck because it could not fail. You did not act to test, to hope, to wonder. You acted because the path was already cleared, the opponent already positioned, the outcome already sealed by what had been allowed to unfold. That is the essence of retreat. It is not pause, it is permission. Permission for the enemy to overcommit. Permission for the terrain to shift in your favor. Permission for time to do what force alone cannot. You gain nothing by rushing into a storm you cannot shape. But if you become the weather, if you learn to let the wind wear down the mountain, then even the immovable will fall before you. Most warriors cannot wait. Their blood demands motion. Their pride demands noise. But I have no use for such impatience. The one who cannot wait is already defeated by time. The one who cannot bear retreat is already led by fear. It is not the size of your army that determines your power. It is the size of your silence. The bigger the ego, the louder the march. But war is not volume. It is vibration. It is felt, not heard. A true strategist moves like pressure in the earth, invisible, slow, and irresistible. To retreat is to become that pressure, unseen, but always building. I have watched nations collapse not from battle, but from blindness. Their enemies did not conquer them. They consumed themselves by charging forward into every illusion offered to them. Each step they took, they thought was progress. Each noise they made, they thought was command. But they never realized they had been drawn out, not by force, but by space. The enemy gave them what they wanted, the illusion of winning. And in that illusion, they exposed everything. That is the trap of speed. It feels like victory until it reveals the cliff. You must resist the hunger to move. You must resist the intoxication of early triumph. A single, unchecked advantage can become a poison when left unguarded. The moment you believe you are winning is often when you begin to lose. That is why I withdraw, to see clearly. Retreat clears the air. It strips away the smoke of pride and assumption. It allows you to see not just the battlefield, but the battlefield inside yourself. You begin to ask, am I moving because I must, or because I fear not moving? That question must be answered before every campaign, before every strike, before every word spoken. Strategy is not choosing what to do. It is choosing what not to do. And most of all, when not to do it. In retreat, you reclaim that choice. You are not being pulled. You are pulling back. You are not being pushed. You are positioning. There is no shame in stepping away. There is only danger in stepping too soon. I do not fear falling behind, because I do not race. I pace. I align. I adjust the rhythm of the field until it moves to my measure. This is not manipulation. This is mastery. And mastery needs no spotlight. The greatest victories are not those shouted from towers. They are those barely noticed until the war is over. Because the true strategist does not conquer bodies. He conquers outcomes. I have walked into battles already won. Because the moment of victory was not the clash, but the conditions I created long before it. The moment I drew them forward. The moment I gave up what seemed essential, but was actually bait. The moment I stepped back and watched the entire structure tilt. That is retreat, not escape, not surrender, but the intentional loosening of grip, so your opponent grips harder and loses balance. You must never fight from need. You must fight only from clarity, and clarity is what retreat provides. It strips away urgency, softens the noise, reveals the real terrain beneath the map. Because the map is always a lie. But the ground, the feel of it, the texture beneath your step, the weight of silence on the wind, that is truth. Most leaders chase maps. They plan, they draw, they mark objectives with bright flags. But they never feel the soil. They never notice the slow shift of power beneath the surface. So they charge toward a point that no longer exists. I wait. I listen. I feel. The moment the ground begins to tilt, I adjust. The moment the enemy reaches too far, I offer them more space. Because I know they will take it. Because I know they must. Because they do not understand restraint. That is my strike. It comes not from above, not from behind, but from within the very path they chose. I do not walk the direct road. I shape it. I do not need to win over and over. I need only wait until my victory becomes the only possible result. This is the shape of retreat, a bow drawn slowly, quietly, relentlessly, and when it is released, it does not miss. So I step back, not in fear, but in full control. Control is not declared. It is not performed. It is not broadcast through action. Control is demonstrated in what you do not do. In the blows, you choose not to swing. In the fire, you allow to burn out on its own. In the insults that pass through you without resistance. Because they have no path to touch what you have fortified within. The one who retreats is not the one who leaves. He is the one who does not waste. He discards nothing of value. He takes everything with him, except the illusion of urgency. He sees time not as a threat, but as a tool. Because every moment that passes in retreat sharpens what is next. Do not be seduced by movement. A river flows, but a lake reflects. And sometimes, clarity is more powerful than force. You cannot overpower what you have not yet understood. That is why so many fail. They believe battle is about dominance. But war is not won through pressure alone. It is won through perception. To know what moves your enemy, to see the fracture before it forms, that is power. Retreat reveals these things. Distance reveals them. The absence of motion gives shape to the truth of things. When you are not entangled in their chaos, you can see where it leads. And often, it leads nowhere. But the undisciplined will follow it anyway. They will call your stillness weakness. They will call your restraint cowardice. Let them. Their words are not arrows. They are echoes. And you must never chase echoes. You must remain, fixed in silence, rooted in structure, even as you appear to bend. Because in retreat, you bend only to reset the line, not to collapse it. I have learned more from stepping away than I ever did from stepping forward. Because when I step away, the world reveals itself. The traps become visible, the terrain becomes readable, the enemy becomes predictable. I do not need to guess what they will do. I simply give them room to do it. And in that room, they expose everything. Retreat is not emptiness. It is a mirror. It reflects not just them, but you. In your pause, you see whether your will was driven by wisdom or by the need to be seen as powerful. If you cannot walk away, you do not own your power. It owns you. There are moments when absence is the strongest presence, when the weight of what is not said bends the conversation, when the one who does not arrive defines the entire strategy, when the warrior who does not strike becomes the axis around which the others break. I have stood on battlefields where the enemy's eyes searched for me, not because they feared my numbers, but because they feared what they could not predict. The retreat had made me invisible, and the invisible, when disciplined, becomes myth. The strongest armies are not those with the largest force, but those who master disappearance. To be where the enemy thought you would never be. To appear not just in place, but in timing. That is the essence of impact. I do not teach reaction. I do not teach provocation. I teach compression, the building of potential without leakage, the storing of force in silence. Until the strike is not a decision, it is a release. There is a purity in that, a finality. Nothing is wasted. No movement requires correction. No second blow is needed. The retreat prepares this. It holds the tension. It refines the target. It removes all that is unnecessary. So when the moment comes, it comes without effort. The arrow does not strain. The blade does not hesitate. The mind does not flinch. This is why I retreat, not to hide, but to wait for that one point in time where clarity, pressure, terrain, and will align. That is my battlefield, not the place, the moment. And once that moment appears, once I move, the world shifts around it. You must learn to feel that shift. You must learn to wait without weakening, to hold without collapsing. Because most will not last that long. They will move too early, speak too soon, attack without the ground beneath them. They will fall, not because of your blow, but because they created the opening for it. The greatest strategy is often the refusal to intervene in another's collapse. That too is retreat. Let them run toward noise. Let them fall into the brightness. Let them consume space and celebrate territory. Meanwhile, you move in silence, below perception, not to take what they hold, but to own what they do not see. That is where true power lives. I am not where you last saw me. I am not who you thought I was. And when I return, I do not return as what you prepared for. That is retreat fulfilled. That is the first strike, issued by the one who never appeared to draw. Most do not see the strike until it is memory. That is the gift of retreat. It obscures your buildup, hides your alignment, cloaks your sharpening in the shadow of withdrawal. They see your distance, not your preparation. They notice your absence, not your focus. And so they mistake the stillness for sleep, the silence for surrender. That is when you know they are ready to fall. I do not wish to be feared. I wish to be misunderstood until the moment I cannot be. Fear can provoke caution. Misunderstanding provokes arrogance, and arrogance, once inflated, is soft. It does not guard its center. It parades its edges. It chases noise, mocks delay, and when it meets precision, it bursts. You must never need to be seen. Those who require visibility are prisoners of it. They build their strength in front of mirrors, not on the battlefield. They sharpen performance, not perception. And perception is what keeps you alive. Retreat is not concealment of fear. It is the cultivation of perception. Each step away lets you see not just what the enemy does, but what he believes. And belief, not action, is the deepest vulnerability. If he believes you are done, you are free. If he believes you are weak, you are armed. If he believes you are gone, you are everywhere. You do not need to defeat your enemy. You need to let him defeat himself with your retreat as the canvas. I have made silence my terrain. I walk it like others walk plains and hills. I feel its shifts. I hear its echoes. When the noise fades, the truth begins to speak. And I have trained myself to hear only truth. That is how I move, not through guesses, but through inevitability. I do not gamble with force. I cultivate conditions that remove uncertainty. The one who retreats often carries more certainty than the one who charges, because he has chosen clarity over momentum. He has chosen vision over validation. If you do not master this, you will fight too often. You will win battles and lose the war within. Because each unnecessary strike is a drain on your reserves, physical, mental, and strategic. And the strategist who wastes even a single arrow on noise is preparing for a shorter campaign than he realizes. Every step must matter. Every pause must carry weight. Every silence must serve a function. This is the geometry of retreat. It is not an absence of pattern. It is a hidden one. Most cannot read it. They mistake it for emptiness. They step into it as if it were unclaimed. But you know better. You have made the invisible visible. You have built terrain without stone or soil, only timing. And in that terrain, your enemy sinks. You must become the architect of delay, not just in action, but in expectation. Let your adversary wait. Let him tire in that waiting. Let his judgment erode. Let his rhythm break. Then, when he steps forward, not with sharpness, but with hope, let him find only edge. That is the gift of space. That is the function of retreat. You are not avoiding the strike. You are redefining it. You are ensuring that when it comes, it is not merely force. It is fate. I have studied the collapse of men who could not pause. I have stood behind the smoke, waiting, while others fought for the illusion of control. They never saw the trap, because they built it themselves. A single retreat, rightly placed, becomes the turning of a tide. It is not retreat that wins the war. It is the mind that chooses when to retreat and why. Do not mistake delay for indecision. I delay because I have decided. I do not rush because I have resolved. My pace is not slower than yours. It is calibrated. You push to win. I move to eliminate the need to fight. And when the fight comes, I strike where it is already undone. This is not philosophy. It is not abstraction. It is not mysticism. This is structure, mental engineering, strategic architecture. Each pause is part of the design. Each backward step is not away. It is under. I move beneath expectation, beneath prediction, beneath the assumptions of those who only measure speed. Let them measure. Let them mark maps. Let them count days. Let them declare victories before they are won. I am not moved by noise. I am not counted in columns. I do not arrive when expected. And when I do not need to arrive again. Because the one who retreats is often the first to strike. And the first to strike, when all has been aligned, is often the only one who must. There is a moment, brief, weightless, almost silent, when a force prepared in stillness begins to move. That moment cannot be seen by those trained only to look for speed. It has no fanfare, no announcement, but it changes everything. That is when the retreat ends. Not with noise, not with spectacle, but with inevitability. Because a strike that emerges from deep retreat carries no doubt. It has already conquered hesitation. It has no need for confirmation. It is not measured in noise, but in precision. And the deeper the retreat, the sharper the edge. Do not seek to win quickly. Seek to win with finality. To strike in haste is to strike twice. To strike with discipline is to end the matter completely. Retreat grants you that discipline, the kind forged in patience, refined in silence, executed without residue. When I move, it is because everything else has already moved. My enemy has overstepped, the wind has turned, the ground has shifted, and I, who waited without resistance, now hold the center they abandoned in pursuit. This is not luck. It is not chance. It is the science of restraint. In war, most study weapons. Few study absence. But absence is a weapon of its own. The unseen becomes the unguarded. The unguarded becomes the vulnerable. And the vulnerable, once exposed, becomes the target. I have walked through walls of men simply by being what they could not read, by moving when they believed there was nothing left to watch. Because retreat is not exit, it is transformation. The path of strategy is not a straight line. It coils, it contracts, it disappears behind terrain and re-emerges without warning. The fool seeks a pattern to copy. The wise seek alignment to control. And control is never in the charge, it is in the pause that redefines the field. If you cannot pause, you cannot lead. The general who must always act is not in command. He is in reaction. The army that must always advance is already broken, because it cannot bend. And what cannot bend will shatter when the wind turns. So I bend. I fold my position. I draw back my shadow. And in that retreat, I do not lose ground. I collect it, in understanding, in foresight, in choice. While others chase the visible, I study the invisible. While others measure land, I measure error. While others move bodies, I move timing. Because when I strike, I do not strike to harm. I strike to end the necessity of striking. I do not linger in the clash. I do not drink from the chaos. I do not let conflict define me. It is merely a tool, one I deploy only when the silence has completed its work. And that work is long, it is slow, it is internal, but it is complete. There is no room for pride in retreat. Pride corrupts observation. Pride demands that you be seen. But to master retreat, you must release that need. You must become content with not being known until it is too late for the enemy to stop you. That is how the first strike lands. Not from above, not from around, but from within. From the blind spot created by your invisibility. From the overconfidence created by your absence. From the assumption that you would not return. I return, but not as I left. I return with every angle mapped. I return with every silence counted. I return as if I never left, because the field I re-enter is the one I never stopped shaping. The one who strikes first is not the one who moves fastest. The one who strikes first is the one who waited longest. Because the world moves in cycles, it opens itself to clarity for only a moment. If you are impatient, you miss it. If you are reactive, you rush past it. But if you retreat, not just in position, but in mind, you begin to sense it coming. And when it comes, you do not seize it. You meet it, as if it was always yours. That is how I strike. Not with fury, not with noise, but with precision so complete it does not require a second attempt. The one who retreats knows this. He lives not for the moment of display, but for the moment of convergence, where all that was invisible becomes unavoidable, where all that was denied becomes irreversible. Retreat is not an escape from conflict. It is a deeper entry into control. To the outsider, it may look like you have given up, but the outsider does not understand how power works. It does not shine. It does not shout. It shapes. It waits. It returns. Power that returns does not return to begin. It returns to complete. You must understand this. The point of retreat is not survival. It is redefinition. What begins as a step away becomes a redesign of the battlefield. What starts as absence becomes architecture. Each delay reshapes the terms. Each silence breaks momentum. Each backward step builds the conditions for forward inevitability. Most fear the moment they must stop moving forward. But that moment is not an end. It is the true beginning. Because only in the stillness can you see what motion concealed. The illusions, the dependencies, the weight of assumptions pretending to be progress. I retreat to see what others run past, to study what they cannot bear to witness, to wait until the situation reveals what it is, not what it pretends to be. No army trains for that. They train for pressure, for heat, for clash, for confrontation. But few train for the void, the space between, the dark before motion. And yet, it is in that dark that mastery is formed. You do not sharpen your mind in noise. You do not master discipline in motion. You do not learn timing by acting without pause. All clarity is born from the refusal to move when movement would dilute the strike. This is what separates the tactician from the imitator, the ability to sit inside ambiguity without being consumed by it. Most seek resolution, any resolution, because they fear uncertainty. But I welcome it, because it is in uncertainty that the false strategies unravel and the shallow motives burn off like morning mist. Let them search for you. Let them call your name into the void. Let them march on the path they believe you abandoned. And when they find nothing, not resistance, not engagement, not collapse, they will begin to question the ground beneath their own feet. That is the first strike, not when the sword moves, but when the mind of your enemy begins to turn against itself. I do not raise my weapon to defeat men. I raise conditions that make their defeat a conclusion. The blade is only the punctuation. The true sentence was written long before. And it was written in retreat, in the refusal to contest what does not need contesting, in the absence of noise when provoked, in the discipline to hold still while the world demands reaction. This is not passivity. It is the deepest form of control. And control is never about overwhelming. It is about removing the need for struggle. When I return from retreat, I do not come back into their world. I bring mine with me. A world shaped in silence, governed by restraint, timed to the rhythms they no longer recognize. By the time they adjust, it is too late. Do not fear being misunderstood. It is a gift. Do not rush to explain your pause. Let them guess. Do not defend your silence. Let it speak. For those who cannot read, stillness will never understand how war is truly won. They believe in collisions. I believe in conditions. They fight to overpower. I fight to end the need to fight. And that is why I retreat, not to pull away from power, but to become inseparable from it. Not to abandon the strike, but to become the place from which it originates. This is not philosophy. This is not poetry. This is war, practiced in its purest form. A form that requires no spectacle. A form that leaves no trace except the transformation it causes. They will ask where the battle went. They will ask when the fight occurred, and you will say nothing. Because by the time they realize what happened, they will no longer be able to respond. That is the shape of perfect force. It arrives too late to be resisted, and too early to be understood. That is the final form of retreat, when you strike and they do not even know they have been struck. Because the ground is quiet, the air is still, but everything is changed. Change that is permanent does not announce itself. It settles, it embeds, it rewrites. This is what the retreating mind prepares. Not the clash, but the shift. Not the contest, but the condition. I do not strike to destroy what is before me. I strike to eliminate the need for future resistance. When I return, I do not restore what was. I install what must now be. That is why the true strike is never felt in the blow. It is felt in what cannot return. Retreat is the art of elimination without confrontation. Most want to win by force. I win by shape. I remove the space for opposition to survive. I do not ask for surrender. I build the path that leads to it, step by unspoken step, until there is no choice left to the opponent, but to become part of my outcome. Victory is not declared. It is absorbed. By the time they realize what has happened, the map has changed, the terrain is mine, and the war they prepared for has already expired. This is why I move slowly, why I do not seek the applause of action, because war that is felt too loudly often leaves its purpose behind. But war that is engineered in silence fulfills its aim without chaos. The best victories leave no smoke, only the quiet collapse of opposition into alignment. And alignment cannot be forced. It must be drawn, and nothing draws like absence. You must understand this. Not all power is visible. Not all strikes are loud. The greatest command is not when they obey out of fear, but when they follow the direction you shaped without ever seeing your hand. That is retreat completed, when your enemy begins to fulfill your strategy as if it were his own. I need no praise for that. The wind does not seek credit for shifting a mountain. It simply blows, long enough, still enough, until the structure must yield. The strike that comes from this path is not a reaction. It is not a defense. It is a culmination. It is the final note of a rhythm set long ago, unheard by those who dance too fast. I move only when that rhythm demands it, and so my force lands not when they expect it, but precisely when it rewrites what is possible. This is not legend. It is not myth. It is not mystery. It is design. You must learn to retreat with design. Each step back must be shaped. Each delay must be purposeful. Each silence must feed the outcome. You must become the force behind the terrain, the whisper behind the motion, the pause behind the collapse. If they cannot see your influence, that is not weakness. That is evidence of control. True power does not decorate itself. It is content to reside in structure, in certainty, in inevitability. So I let them celebrate their forward movement. I let them cheer their small captures. I let them confuse noise for territory, because by the time they realize the field is no longer theirs, it is not because I stormed it. It is because I shaped it from afar. When I do strike, it will not look like a clash. It will look like gravity, like time, like the conclusion of something they did not know had begun. There will be no rallying cry, no signal, no warning, only the sudden silence that follows a precision too sharp to be met. This is what I prepare in retreat, not an exit, an arrival with no opposition left to face it, not because it was destroyed, but because it dissolved before impact, because it could not survive the shape I made in silence. That is the final truth. The one who retreats is not stepping away. He is stepping into a future where only one outcome remains. And when he strikes, it is not to defeat. It is to complete. Completion is misunderstood by those who seek applause. They expect finality to arrive in thunder, in spectacle, in confirmation. But true completion arrives in stillness. It has no need for sound. It has no interest in being seen. It is a closing of the loop, not a celebration. It does not ask to be honored, because it is inevitable. That is why I strike only once. And when I do, it ends more than the opponent. It ends the illusion that power must be loud. That movement must be constant. That dominance must be visible. In retreat, I abandon the need to be interpreted. I do not explain absence. I do not decorate silence. I let the void speak in patterns others have forgotten how to hear. I allow my opponent to paint their picture of me, to misjudge, to dismiss, to assume. Each assumption they make becomes a step in the direction I chose, not for them, but for what they would become once they stepped into it. Let them come. Let them fall into form. Let them crown themselves in the space I no longer occupy. And when they do, I will return, not with noise, but with the end they prepared for themselves. That is the strike they never see coming, because they believed you were gone. They believed you were finished, but they were measuring your presence by their own metrics: noise, position, response. And you were measuring time, not to escape, to align. Most cannot do this. They are too dependent on being seen. They rush to reappear. They grow nervous when forgotten. But I welcome being forgotten. It frees me from the narrative. It releases me from the performance. It gives me space to reshape the unseen, Because only in the unseen can the real geometry of strategy take root. Only there can you rearrange the structure, not by storm, but by silence. When I vanish, I do not lose momentum. I release it, so that it returns sharper, quieter, exact. A mind trained in retreat is not looking for conflict. It is reading the terrain for truth. Where is the weakness no one guards? Where is the overconfidence swelling beyond its edge? Where is the habit that blinds them? These things do not show themselves when you push. They only appear when you stop. This is why retreat must be learned, not just as a maneuver, but as a state of being. To withdraw without panic, to vanish without loss of presence, to become untouchable, not by force, but by formlessness. It is the highest expression of strategy, to remain ungraspable until the moment you must touch. And when that moment comes, you do not strike with muscle. You strike with structure, with inevitability, with everything that was shaped in the space they thought was empty. That is the difference between noise and consequence. Noise arrives loudly and fades. Consequence arrives quietly and remains. Retreat teaches you to be the latter, to give up the noise, to abandon the need to chase, to choose instead to construct, in silence, in delay, in precision. And once you have constructed enough, once the field bends inward, once the opponent no longer knows where they are or how they arrived there, then, and only then, you move. Not to begin the battle, but to end what has already been decided. That is the strike of the one who retreats. It is not a clash. It is not a war cry. It is a conclusion, delivered by the hand they forgot to watch. They forgot because they never understood. Because they believed war was noise and fire, banners and drums, numbers and declarations. They believed the first to act is the one who holds power. But power does not reside in action. It resides in timing. And timing is not owned by the loud. It is owned by the still. That is why I waited. That is why I vanished. That is why I stepped back when they advanced. Not to flee, but to begin. Because what begins in retreat ends in inevitability. This is not a game of moves. This is a shaping of minds. The greatest generals know the war is won not when you defeat your opponent, but when your opponent no longer understands how he was defeated. That is what I prepare. I do not destroy armies. I dissolve intentions. I do not need to strike down 10,000. I need only to remove their reason to continue. And nothing does that more completely than precision without noise, silence without fear, presence without form. I do not need you to see me. I need you to feel the result of what you missed. This is the end I construct. While they march, I erase paths. While they shout, I remove the walls that echo. While they strike, I disappear, and they collapse into the space I left behind. I am not the shadow. I am the silence behind the shadow. I am not the sword. I am the stillness that aims it. I am not the flame. I am the cold that makes it burn too quickly. They see only the visible, but I command the shape of what is yet to be. They see terrain. I see momentum. They see distance. I see tension. They see nothing. I see everything. Because I do not need to own the battlefield to define it. The battlefield lives in the mind, and in retreat I rearrange it. You must learn this. Never confuse invisibility with absence. Never mistake distance for weakness. Never believe retreat means defeat. Because the one who retreats is not retreating from you. He is retreating from noise, from distraction, from impurity, so that he may return, as clarity, as consequence, as closure. And when he does, he will not need to announce himself. The world will shift around his arrival. The story will rewrite itself in his presence. And the outcome, long rehearsed in silence, will unfold in a single breath. This is why I retreat. Because I am not here to win your game. I am here to end it. Without argument. without resistance, without return, because when the one who retreats finally strikes, there is no next move. Only stillness, only completion, only truth. And I am already there.